Hey guys, how are you? Hope you're all doing very well. This afternoon I'm going to be doing another movie review. This movie is a mystery horror film from France, English language, released in the year 2016, directed by Christophe Deroux, and this film is called Sam Was Here. So Sam Was Here is about this salesman named Sam. He has been assigned the task of selling some goods at this very remote caravan community deep within the Mojave Desert. So his boss basically says, this is what you're going to do for the next few weeks. So he goes there, he comes to the motel that he's supposed to stay at, but he realizes that no one's there. So he sees himself to a room, much to his confusion, but that confusion is about to intensify when he's knocking on these caravans but no one's answering. So he rings his boss to tell him that it's a waste of time, but his boss is not answering the phone. So he decides to ring his wife because he misses his wife and young daughter, but his wife is not answering the phone. So he's very dumbfounded by this situation. But then this situation has begun to become very bizarre when he gets a message on his pager of someone accusing him of being a pedophile. So he believes that this is a case of mistaken identity, but this mistaken identity is about to go down a very dangerous path when these accusations lead to people actually appearing and setting out to actually hurt this guy because of this. So not only does he have to actually set out to prove his innocence, but he also has to try and keep a grip on his sanity that he believes he is slowly slipping. So whether or not that is the case is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on Sam Was Here. This is an incredibly bizarre film, and I can really appreciate the movie for what it was trying to do, but ultimately I thought it had a few more negatives than it did have positives. Now, a big negative I have with this movie is that it's definitely a clash of two cultures within world cinema. And so this movie is actually directed at an American audience, but I think the overall European feel that this movie has is actually going to set a lot of people off guard. And I can understand why a lot of people hated this film, is because it does have that level of European frustration, which I'll go into a little bit later. But I will say, thankfully, it does have some very impressive aspects in this movie, and the most impressive aspect is the overall setting of the Mojave Desert. The Mojave Desert in this movie is done in a very surreal way, so it actually contributes that ambiguity that the movie really wants, is that you're constantly asking yourself, is this guy losing his sanity, or is this guy actually facing reality? And because the Mojave Desert is so big, it gives you that sense of desolation, it gives you that sense of isolation, and it allows you to absorb yourself into these characters, because he is definitely the lone person in this film. Is that a lot of the movie is just him wandering around, and so it actually allows you to actually feel as though this overall setting and the loneliness is absorbing into this character to make him the person that he is, and it gives you the ambiguity to this character that I thought the director really wanted. So the overall setting was very good. I thought the score was phenomenal. The score actually gives you a lot of emotion to this character. So the overall characters to this film not only is the main character, but the characters of the people of the things that you can't see, such as the score and the atmosphere. And so as far as atmospheric films are concerned, I thought this movie really did nail it in actually creating something that was very unsettling. And I like the fact that this character, this main character, because he was so subtle, because you didn't get too much depth into him, you didn't really relate to this character, but you could actually use this character as a vessel, in that you could actually step into this guy's shoes, is because you're oblivious to the situation as he is. A lot of films allow you to be the puppeteer, but in this movie, you're not the puppeteer. And that, what I mean by that is, a puppeteer is the main character is the puppet, and is because you know what the situation is but the character doesn't, you can dictate as to what the consequences are going to be from a result of this guy's actions. But because you're oblivious to the situation, the puppeteering in this film is non-existent. So it creates a lot of suspense, it creates a lot of disorientation, and it creates a lot of questions that ultimately prevent the film from being boring. And so I really like that, and I thought the movie leads up to an absolutely fascinating ending, which leaves a lot up into your interpretation, which is something I really appreciate. So I had my interpretation as to what this film was about, which I'm not going to give away, so I don't want to spoil it, but I thought it was a very rewarding way that it finished, in that it was allowing the viewer to use their brain. This is a movie that is very European, and what European films do so well is that it pays respect to the viewer's intelligence, and that it doesn't have to dumb everything down, it doesn't have to tie up loose ends and tell you this is what it's about. This is a movie that's telling you this is what you think it's about, and that someone else could have a different idea, a different theory, and that you can discuss it. So the movie allows you to really experience it, as opposed to actually just merely being entertained by it. So there are a few scenes of shocking violence that I thought were actually quite decent, and there's some very bizarre characters that are introduced later into the film that I thought really made a very bizarre sort of nature that the movie wanted. So as far as cinema is concerned, I thought it was very, very ambitious, but unfortunately that ambition wasn't it didn't necessarily pay off, in that you've got a movie that feels very frustrating, in that you've got a lot of questions that are unanswered, but for the sake of the progression of the film, I thought it would have been a lot better if some of those questions were answered for the sake of the plot thickening in order to make a more continuous film. And so the biggest problem is that because those questions aren't really answered, it feels like it's a very flat experience, and that you're going around, you're obtaining all these questions, but because you're not getting answers, and you actually think that the sole purpose of this film is within arm's reach, but you can't quite reach it, therefore you're becoming agitated. And because you're becoming agitated, you're not really experiencing the film as well as the director wants you to. And I think that with a few little plot thickens and maybe a few twists and turns, it could have elevated the film up until the very good ending. But because you got a very flat playing field, and then when the end hits you, it goes up, you feel as though it's a very inconsistent style of film. So the majority of this movie, I thought to myself, what is the point of this? What is going on? Come on, I really want these answers. But then right at the end, it does hit you with something that makes you think, but it's until the ending that I thought it was a little bit pedestrian. It never gets boring, but I think it was wandering around in circles a little bit too much, and it was begging questions that didn't really get the answers that was necessary. So I'm all for movies that don't give you the answers to everything, but I thought in this film, just that answers to a few things would have made it a lot better, and therefore a movie that I could really recommend to a lot more people. So overall, this is a movie that was very ambitious. It's a French production that is aimed at an American audience, set in America, American actor, and English language. But unfortunately, that European frustration really does come into the forefront, as is the case with a few other European films. It doesn't happen all the time, but a few times there are movies that are a little bit too ambitious for its own good, and I definitely think that Sam Was Here is one of them. So I'll still recommend it if you want something different, but unfortunately there is just a little bit too much frustration to really enjoy it as much as I wanted to. So overall, if I'm going to give this film 2.5 stars, I was a little bit disappointed, but I really did appreciate it more than I actually liked it. So, yeah. Okay guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later. Bye.